They didn't hate me. That would have required actual effort. They simply edited me out, treating me like background noise, while my sister curated her life for applause. I was quietly building an empire they could not comprehend. They assumed my silence meant I was struggling, but I was not behind. I was winning in a tax bracket they could not even imagine. When they finally heard me, it wasn't love, it was the sound of millions. My name is Lila Nelson, and for the first 3 decades of my life, I existed as a placeholder, in cinema. They call them extras, the people blurring into the focus of the lens, holding coffee cups or walking dogs, purely to give the scene texture so the protagonist has a world to inhabit. In my family, I was the texture. I was the beige paint on the walls, the hum of the refrigerator, the background noise that you only notice when the power cuts out and the silence becomes aggressive. I am 32 years old, and I have learned that every family operates like a film production. There are producers, there are directors, and there is always, inevitably, only one lead vocalist. In the Nelson household, that role was occupied by my sister, Sienna. Sienna was 2 years younger than me, but she took up space like she was 10 feet tall. She was the family's living highlight reel. From the moment she could walk, she was performing. If she scraped her knee, it was a tragedy worthy of a Greek play. If she drew a picture, it was evidence of prodigious artistic genius. As we grew older, the dynamic calcified. Sienna was pretty in a loud, demanding way, bright eyes, loud laugh, the kind of person who enters a room and immediately checks to see who is watching her. She was always busy, a word she used like a badge of honor. Her busyness was a production. She was always rushing to a photo shoot, or managing a crisis with a friend, or starting a new venture that required everyone's immediate emotional investment. I, on the other hand, was just Lila. I was reliable. I was quiet. I was there. I remember a specific Thanksgiving at my parents' house in our small hometown of Oak Haven. The air smelled of sage and overcooked turkey, a scent that always triggered a mild, distinct headache behind my left eye. The house was crowded. Aunts, uncles, and cousins were squeezed into the living room, balancing paper plates on their knees. Sienna was in the center of the room, standing while everyone else sat, recounting a story about a barista who had been rude to her that morning. She told it with hand gestures, breathless pauses, and wide-eyed indignation. "And I told him," she said, her voice pitching up. "I am not asking for the moon. I am just asking for oat milk. Can you believe the audacity?" My mother, Marjorie, was looking at her with a rapt, soft expression, the kind usually reserved for religious icons. "Oh, Sienna, you handle people so well," she sighed. "You have such a presence." I was sitting in the corner, on the arm of the beige sofa, nursing a glass of lukewarm water. My Aunt Linda, a woman who wore too much floral perfume and had never remembered my birthday without a Facebook reminder, drifted toward me. She looked at me, blinked, and then gave a tight, polite smile. It was the smile you give to a stranger in an elevator. "So, Lila," she said, her voice dropping an octave as if she were entering a library, "you're still doing computers?" Doing computers. That was the family classification for my entire existence. It did not matter that I explained my job every single year. It did not matter that the digital world was vast and complex. To them, I was essentially a mechanic for screens. "Yes, Aunt Linda," I said, keeping my voice even. "Still working in tech." "Good for you," she said, her eyes already glazing over, drifting back towards Sienna, who was now reenacting the barista's facial expression. "It is nice to have something steady. Safe. Safe. That was the word they used for me. Sienna was adventurous and passionate. I was safe. It was not a compliment. It was a dismissal. It meant I required no maintenance and offered no entertainment. I was the low-maintenance sedans of daughters. I learned very early on that in my family, attention was not a currency you earned through effort. You did not get it by getting good grades, or by cleaning the kitchen without being asked, or by being kind. Attention was earned by optics. It was a visual medium. Sienna had optics. She knew how to catch the light. She knew how to frame a disaster so it looked like heroism. I only had results, and results are boring. Results are invisible unless something goes wrong. When I moved out at 22, I did it with the efficiency of a military operation. I packed my boxes while everyone was asleep. I found an apartment 3 hours away in a city where nobody knew the Nelson name. I expected an outcry. Perhaps a tearful scene in the driveway. Instead, my father, Dennis, just frowned at the moving truck and asked if I had enough money for gas. My mother told me to make sure I updated my address so her holiday cards would not bounce back. They assumed I was moving away because I could not compete. They thought I was retreating. In a way, I was tired of being the audience for Sienna's one-woman show, but mostly, I was moving because I had realized that if I stayed, I would eventually stop existing altogether. Over the next 10 years, I built a life that was aggressively private. I stopped correcting them when they underestimated me. In fact, I began to lean into it. When I visited home, which was rare, or spoke to them on the phone, I kept my descriptions of my life beige and uninteresting. "How is work?" my father would ask, usually during a commercial break of whatever football game he was watching. "Fine," I would say. "Just fixing servers, updating spreadsheets, boring stuff." Right, he would say, relieved that he did not have to ask follow-up questions. "Well, keep at it. Steady paycheck." The reality was a galaxy away from updating spreadsheets. I was not working a help desk. I was not resetting passwords for forgotten accounts. I had spent my 20s grinding in a way Sienna could not comprehend. I worked during the day and studied at night. I took certification exams that cost thousands of dollars and required months of preparation. I moved from systems administration into network security, and then into risk management. I collected credentials like some women collect designer shoes: CISSP, CISM, CRISC, acronyms that would mean absolutely nothing to Aunt Linda, but meant everything in the boardrooms where I actually spent my time. I worked late-night contracts for firms that handled data for Fortune 500 companies. I sat in meetings where we discussed threat vectors and zero-day vulnerabilities that could cripple a bank in 45 seconds, but I never told them. Why would I? To them, I was the computer girl. Any attempt to explain the complexity of my career would just sound like I was trying too hard. It would sound like I was trying to be Sienna, and that was a sin. The family group chat was the perfect microcosm of this dynamic. It was titled Nelson Family Love, a name Sienna had chosen, followed by 3 red heart emojis. My phone would buzz, a photo from Sienna, a selfie of her holding a latte with a foam heart, pouting at the camera. Caption: Monday blues but making it cute. Sparkle emoji. Within 3 minutes, the reactions would roll in. Mom: Beautiful, sweetie. You look so tired though. Get some rest. Dad: Looking good, kiddo. Aunt Linda, who was somehow in the immediate family chat: Stunning. Then, I would post something, maybe a picture of the view from my apartment, or a generic happy birthday message. The response? Nothing. Or, if I was lucky, the little scene icon would appear under my message, followed by silence. Hours later, Sienna would post a meme, and the conversation would explode again. I told myself I preferred it this way. I told myself I was above their shallow need for validation. I was a serious person doing serious work. I did not need heart emojis from people who thought the cloud was literally in the sky. I cultivated a sense of superiority to protect myself. I told myself that their ignorance was a shield. If they did not know what I did, they could not critique it. They could not compare it to Sienna's latest modeling gig, which was usually an unpaid collaboration with a local boutique, and find me wanting. But the human heart is a treacherous thing. It does not always listen to logic. There was a Tuesday evening, about 6 months ago, that cracked my resolve. I was sitting in my living room, the lights of the city skyline glittering through my floor-to-ceiling windows. I was drinking a glass of wine that cost $80 a bottle. I was wearing cashmere. I was objectively successful. The group chat buzzed. Sienna had posted a video of her cat doing something mildly amusing. My mother had responded with 20 laughing emojis. I stared at the screen. I felt a sudden, pathetic urge to participate. I wanted to be part of the joke. I wanted them to see me. I typed out a response. It was a witty observation, a callback to an inside joke from 10 years ago. I typed it, then deleted it. I typed it again, rewording it to sound more casual. I sat there for 5 minutes, rehearsing a text message to my own family, terrified that it would land with a thud. I was sweating. My heart was racing. I realized, with a wave of hot shame that started in my stomach and burned up to my throat, that I was begging. I was 32 years old, a senior leader in my industry, a woman who commanded rooms of executives, and I was terrified of being ignored by my mother and sister. I deleted the text. I put the phone face down on the marble coffee table. I felt like a ghost haunting my own life. That was the night I realized that background noise is not a passive state. It is an active infliction. They were not just ignoring me, they were editing me out. They had constructed a narrative of the Nelson family where Sienna was the protagonist, and I was the extra who filled the seat at the Thanksgiving table, so it didn't look empty. But here's the thing about extras. Nobody pays attention to what they are holding in their pockets. Nobody checks their bank accounts. Nobody asks them what they do when the director yells, "Cut." My family looked at me and saw a beige sweater and a boring job. They saw a woman who lived in a small apartment in the city. They never asked for the square footage, so I never volunteered it. They saw someone who was barely getting by, someone who needed their pity, or at least their benevolent neglect. They were wrong. They thought I was the quiet, struggling sister who did computers. They did not know that 3 weeks ago. I negotiated a contract that included a signing bonus larger than my father's entire pension. They did not know that the small apartment I rented was actually a penthouse condo I had bought with cash 2 years ago. They did not know that my net worth had crossed the 7-figure mark while they were busy liking Sienna's Instagram posts. I was not behind. I was not struggling. I was not the safe option. I was winning. I was winning in a game they did not even know was being played. I was winning in a tax bracket they could not imagine without getting a headache. For years, I hid my success because I thought it would alienate them. I thought if they knew I had money, they would feel bad about themselves. I thought my silence was an act of kindness. I thought I was protecting their fragile egos by letting them believe I was mediocre. But as I sat there that Tuesday night, watching the notifications roll in for Sienna's cat, I realized something else. They did not think I was mediocre because I hid my success. They thought I was mediocre because it was the only role they were willing to cast me in. Even if I showed them the bank statements, they would try to find a way to make it smaller. They would ask if it was a mistake. They would ask if it was legal. They would ask why I had not given some to Sienna. I picked up my glass of wine and walked to the window. The city below was a grid of golden light. Millions of people living millions of lives. I was one of them. I was powerful. I was capable. And I was completely, utterly invisible to the people who shared my DNA. "Fine," I whispered to the empty room. "You want me to be background noise? I will be the quietest thing you have ever heard." I took a sip of the wine. It tasted like oak and blackberries and victory. They assumed my silence was weakness. They assumed my distance was shame. But they were about to learn that the quietest tracks are often the ones that hold the entire structure together. And when you finally hear them, really hear them, it is usually because the rest of the song has fallen apart. I turned my phone over. I opened the group chat. I did not type a joke. I did not send an emoji. I simply archived the thread, watching it disappear from my main screen. It was time to stop rehearsing for a play I was never going to be cast in. I had my own script now. And in my script, the background noise was about to get deafeningly expensive. At Kestrel Ridge Systems, we do not deal in hypotheticals. We deal in absolute terrifying certainties. My official title is Senior Director of Risk Mitigation, but that is just corporate shorthand for being the person who stands between a multinational corporation and total collapse. When a pharmaceutical giant fears their proprietary formula has been leaked to a competitor in Shanghai, they do not call the police, they call us. When a bank notices a microprocessor shaving fractions of a cent off every transaction into an offshore shell account, they call me. My office in downtown Seattle is on the 42nd floor. It is a fortress of glass and steel, cool to the touch and silent as a tomb. I spent my Tuesday morning reviewing a security audit for a logistics firm that moves $3 billion of cargo annually. The discrepancy I found was small, a rounding error in a shipping manifest that occurred every third Friday. To the untrained eye, it was a glitch. To me, it was a pattern. By noon, I had traced it to an internal embezzlement scheme funneling $200,000 a month into a cryptocurrency wallet. I authorized the freeze on the accounts, sent the encrypted dossier to the client's legal team, and went to lunch. It was a strange dissonance to live in two parallel universes simultaneously. In this world, the world of Kestrel Ridge, I commanded a team of 15 elite analysts. My signature was required to authorize operational budgets that exceeded the GDP of small island nations. I wore tailored blazers that cost more than my first car. My voice, when I spoke in meetings, ended discussions, in the other universe, the one my family inhabited. I was Lila the IT girl. I was the one you called when the printer was jammed or when Netflix was buffering. I remember a phone call with my mother, Marjorie, just last week. I was standing in my kitchen, a sleek, minimalist space with quartz countertops and a view of the Puget Sound that looked like a painting of gray and silver. I had just closed on this condo 3 months ago. It was an all-cash offer. "Lila," my mother had said, her voice tinny through the speaker, "your father is having trouble with the iPad again. He says the icon for the solitaire game is gone. Do you think you could FaceTime him later and walk him through it? You know how good you are with the computer stuff. I have a meeting until 6. Mom," I said, looking at the bottle of sparkling water on my counter. "But I can try after that." "Oh, right. Your job," she said, her tone dismissing it even as she acknowledged it. "Well, try not to work too hard. It is not good for your eyes to stare at screens all day. You know, Sienna is worried about you. She says sitting all day is the new smoking." I almost laughed. It would have been a bitter, jagged sound. Sienna was worried about my health while I was busy securing the infrastructure that allowed her to use her credit cards. "Tell her thanks for the concern," I said. My family had put me in a box labeled technical support 15 years ago, and they had welded the lid shut. To them, my career was a nebulous, uninteresting void. They imagined me sitting in a windowless basement, tangled in wires, resetting modems for angry customers. They did not ask questions because they did not think the answers would be interesting. They assumed my life was small because I did not broadcast it, and I let them. That was the complexity of my silence. I did not correct them because explaining my life felt like handing them a weapon. If they knew I made $400,000 a year in base salary alone, not counting bonuses and equity, the dynamic would shift. I would no longer be the invisible daughter. I would be the bank. I preferred invisibility. Invisibility was safe. Invisibility meant I could fly to Tokyo for a weekend just to see the cherry blossoms and eat sushi at a counter that seated 6 people. And I did not have to explain to anyone why I spent that much money on a plane ticket. I sat down on my sofa, cream linen, Italian, terrifyingly white, and opened my phone. I had 5 minutes before my next conference call. Against my better judgment, I opened Instagram. Sienna's face filled the screen. She was wearing a beige hat and holding a bouquet of wildflowers that looked strategically arranged. The location tag was a vineyard about an hour from our hometown. The caption read, "Chasing the sun and finding myself. Remember, you can't pour from an empty cup. Self-care is not selfish, with a little sparkle and a prayer." It had 412 likes. I looked at the photo with the forensic eye I used for fraud detection. I noticed the way the light hit her hair. She had definitely paid for a blowout that morning. I noticed the bracelet on her wrist, a designer knockoff I had seen in a targeted ad last week. I noticed the strained tightness around her eyes, that the filter could not quite smooth away. Sienna's life was a performance art piece titled, "Everything is Perfect," but I knew the back-end analytics of that performance. I knew she was driving a leased luxury SUV she could barely afford. I knew she was constantly borrowing money from our parents for business investments that never seemed to yield a profit. Her validation was loud, constant, and publicly sourced. She needed the likes like a diabetic needs insulin. My validation was in the silence. It was in the heavy, reassuring weight of my investment portfolio. It was in the key card that opened the doors to Kestrel Ridge. It was in the knowledge that if I wanted to, I could buy that vineyard she was posing in and turn it into a parking lot. But looking at her post, seeing the comments from our cousins, so gorgeous, and living the dream, I felt that old familiar ache. It was the irony of our existence. Sienna's perfect life cost her constant, exhausting effort to maintain the illusion. My quiet life cost me my identity within my own family. To keep my freedom, I had to accept being forgotten. My phone buzzed, startling me. It was not a notification from the app. It was a call. The caller ID said, "Evelyn Nelson." My grandmother. I sat up straighter. Evelyn was the anomaly in the Nelson genetic code. She was 80 years old, sharp as a tack, and possessed a bullshit detector that rivaled the software I used at work. She lived in a retirement community that was nicer than most resorts. Funded by a series of shrewd real estate investments she had made in the 70s when everyone else was buying mood rings. "Hello, Grandma," I answered, keeping my voice warm. "Lila," she said. Her voice was dry and clear, like autumn leaves crunching underfoot. "I am calling to make sure you received the invitation, the paper one. I sent it to your P.O. box because I know you are paranoid about your home address." I smiled. Evelyn was the only one who knew I used a P.O. box for family correspondence. She was the only one who suspected that doing computers was a euphemism for something much larger. "I haven't checked the box this week," I admitted. "What is the occasion?" "My 80th birthday. Of course," she said. "And do not pretend you forgot. I know you have a calendar in that brain of yours that tracks everything." "I didn't forget the date," I said. "I just didn't expect a formal invitation." "It is not a backyard barbecue, Lila," she said. "I am renting the ballroom at the Sterling Heights Hotel. Black tie, catered dinner, a jazz band. I intend to spend a significant portion of my children's inheritance on a single evening of hedonism because I have earned it." And I laughed. It was a genuine laugh, the first one I had uttered all day. "That sounds like a power move, Grandma." "It is," she said. "But here's the thing. I want you there, and I do not want you to come as the ghost. You know what I mean." I paused. The air in my apartment seemed to go still. "I don't know what you mean." "Do not lie to an old woman. It is bad karma," Evelyn snapped gently. "I watch you at these gatherings. Lila, you shrink. You fold yourself up into a little origami square so you fit in the corner. You let Marjorie talk over you. You let Sienna treat you like a blurred background. It bores me." My grip on the phone tightened. "I just try to keep the peace. Grandma, you know how they are." "I know exactly how they are," she said. "They are dazzled by shiny objects. Sienna is a sequin. You are a diamond. But you keep coating yourself in dust so you do not blind them. Stop it." "It's easier this way," I said softly. "Easier is for lazy people," she countered. "I am turning 80. I have very little patience left for mediocrity, and I have zero patience for seeing my smartest grandchild act like a doormat. I want you to come to this party, Lila, and I want you to look like the woman I know you are. I want to see the Lila who exists when they are not looking." She paused, letting the words settle. "If you come wearing one of those beige cardigans you seem to love so much, I will have security escort you out," she added. "You wouldn't," I said. "Try me," she said. "Saturday, the 15th of next month, 7 in the evening. Don't be late. And Lila? Bring the loud version of yourself. The quiet one is not on the guest list. The line went dead. I lowered the phone and looked out the window. The rain had started to fall, streaking the glass, blurring the city lights into long ribbons of color. The Sterling Heights Hotel. It was the most expensive venue in our hometown. It was the kind of place where people got married when they wanted to prove they had old money, or when they wanted to pretend they did. Going back there was always a calculation of risk versus reward. The risk was high. Exposure, judgment, the exhausting labor of navigating my mother's passive-aggressive comments about my marital status, single, and my hair, practical. The risk of Sienna using me as a prop for her social media stories. The drab sister who makes her look even more vibrant by comparison. Usually. The reward was zero, so I usually skipped it, or I went and performed the role of the ghost. But Evelyn's words were itching under my skin. You shrink. You fold yourself up. I stood up and walked to my bedroom. I opened the walk-in closet. It was divided into two distinct sections. On the left was my family visit wardrobe. It was a depressing collection of gray slacks, loose-fitting sweaters, and sensible flats. It was the wardrobe of a woman who works in a cubicle and apologizes when someone bumps into her. On the right was my real wardrobe, the clothes I wore to negotiate seven-figure contracts, the clothes I wore when I took myself out to dinner at Michelin-starred restaurants, structured blazers with sharp shoulders, silk blouses in deep emerald and charcoal, stilettos that clicked on the floor with the authority of a gavel, a black dress with a neckline that was elegant but severe, a dress that said, I am not here to be liked, I am here to be respected. I ran my hand over the fabric of the black dress. It was cool and smooth. For 10 years. I had kept these two worlds strictly separated. It was a firewall. If I breached it, if I let the Lila of Kestrel Ridge walk into the Nelson family dynamic, the disruption would be catastrophic. It would shatter the comfortable narrative they had built. It would force them to see me, and once they saw me, really saw me, they would realize that they had been looking past me for decades. I thought about Sienna's perfect life, funded by debt and validation. I thought about my mother's dismissal of my computer stuff. I thought about the way they talked about me when I wasn't there. The pitiable Lila. The background noise. I was tired of the noise. I pulled the black dress off the hanger. I held it up against my body in the full-length mirror. The woman looking back at me did not look like IT support. She looked dangerous. She looked like someone who knew where the bodies were buried because she had arranged for the digging permits. I was going to Evelyn's party. I was going to walk into the Sterling Heights Hotel. But I was not going to shrink. I was not going to wear beige. I was going to introduce them to the stranger who had been sharing their last name for 32 years. I reached for my phone and dialed my assistant. Sarah, I said when she answered, I need you to book a flight to Oakhaven for the 15th, first class, and book a suite at the Sterling Heights, the presidential. If it is available, if it isn't, offer them double to make it available. Personal trip? Sarah asked. Something like that, I said, staring at my reflection. I have a performance review to attend. I hung up. The decision was made. The firewall was coming down. And if they got burned by the heat of who I really was, well, that was a risk I was finally willing to accept. The valet at the Sterling Heights Hotel did not ask me if I was here for a delivery, which was usually how my arrival at high-end venues in my hometown began. Instead, he opened the door of my rental car, a sleek, black sedan I had upgraded to at the airport, with a deferential nod. He glanced at my shoes as I stepped out. They were not the scuffed flats I usually wore to family Thanksgiving. They were Italian leather, with a heel sharp enough to puncture a lung, and they made a decisive, expensive sound on the pavement. I walked into the lobby. The air smelled of lilies and old money, a scent that was nostalgic and suffocating all at once. My stomach tightened, a reflex from 3 decades of being the Nelson family's designated wallflower. But I breathed through it. I was not that woman tonight. I was the senior director of risk mitigation at Kestrel Ridge Systems. I had flown in first class. I was wearing a silk slip dress in a shade of midnight blue that looked like ink in the dim light. I wore no necklace, only a pair of diamond studs that were small, flawless, and worth more than my father's truck. I took the elevator to the ballroom floor. The doors slid open, and the noise of the party washed over me. The clinking of crystal, the drone of polite conversation, the soft thrum of a jazz bass. I stood at the entrance for a moment. Nobody noticed me. That was the default setting. I watched them. I saw my father, Dennis, near the bar, laughing too loudly at a joke told by a local councilman. I saw my mother, Marjorie, fluttering between tables, adjusting napkins that were already perfect, and I saw Sienna. She was in the center of the room. Naturally, she was wearing a gold-sequined dress that caught every photon of light in the zip code. She was holding court, surrounded by 3 of our cousins, gesturing wildly with a champagne flute. She looked radiant. She also looked exhausting. I stepped into the room. The first person to see me was Aunt Linda. She was mid-bite into a shrimp puff, and she froze. Her eyes widened, then narrowed, as if her brain was trying to render a file that was incompatible with her operating system. She nudged my uncle. He turned, looked, and stopped chewing. The silence rippled outward from the door. Not all at once, but in a slow, contagious wave. It moved from the fringe relatives to the immediate family. My mother turned. She blinked. Her expression was a masterclass in cognitive dissonance. She looked at my face, which she knew, and then at the rest of me, which she clearly did not. She looked for the slouch. She looked for the apologetic smile. She looked for the department store clearance rack polyester. She found none of it. "Lila?" she said. Her voice carried across the sudden quiet of the entryway. It was not a greeting. It was a question. I walked toward her. I did not rush. I did not scurry. I walked with the stride of a woman who charges by the hour for her expertise. "Hello, Mom," I said. My voice was calm, pitched low. "You look—" She trailed off, her hands fluttering uselessly toward my shoulders. "You look very fancy. Is that a costume? I mean, is it a rental? For the party?" "It is mine," I said, before she could process that. Sienna descended. She moved through the crowd like a heat-seeking missile wrapped in glitter. "Lila!" she shrieked. It was her performance voice, the one she used for Instagram stories. She threw her arms around me. The hug lasted 3 seconds too long. I felt her body tense against mine. She was not hugging me. She was appraising me. I felt her hand slide down my back, feeling the grain of the silk. She pulled back, her hands gripping my biceps, and her eyes did a rapid, vertical scan. Hair, professional blowout. Skin, expensive regime. Dress, designer. Shoes, serious. She smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. Her eyes were doing math. "Wow," Sienna said, a little breathlessly. "Look at you. You cleaned up. Did you get a makeover? Was there a Groupon?" She laughed, inviting the room to join her in the joke. A few people chuckled nervously. The old Lila would have laughed too, self-deprecating and eager to diffuse the tension. The old Lila would have said, "Oh, you know, just trying not to embarrass you guys." I did not laugh. I just looked at her. "No Groupon," I said. "Just a haircut." Sienna's smile faltered. The joke had landed on concrete. She released my arms and took a half step back, sensing a shift in the atmospheric pressure. "Well," my father boomed, stepping into the circle. He slapped me on the shoulder, a heavy, claiming gesture. "Good to see you, kid. Glad you could make the drive. Traffic wasn't too bad, I hope." He assumed I had driven. He assumed I was coming from the generic apartment 3 hours away. "I flew," I said. "Flew?" He frowned. "Seems like a waste of money for such a short trip. But hey, your dime." "Yes," I said. "It is." The tension was starting to thicken. People were watching. They sensed that the script was being rewritten in real time, but they didn't know the new lines. Then, the crowd parted. My grandmother, Evelyn, sat at the head table like a monarch on a throne. She was wearing a velvet suit and holding a cane she didn't really need. She beckoned to me with one finger. I walked over to her. The room turned to watch the summons. "Happy birthday, Grandma," I said, leaning down to kiss her cheek. She smelled of lavender and iron. "You listened," she whispered, her eyes dancing. "Good." She tapped her glass with a spoon. The room, already quiet, went silent. She did not stand up, because she didn't have to. "I have a question," Evelyn announced to the room, her voice amplified by the microphone on the table. "My granddaughter Lila is here, and I realized something today. I realized that none of you actually know anything about her." She turned her gaze to me. It was a challenge. It was a gift. "Tell us, sweetheart," Evelyn said, loud and clear. "Where are you living these days? And what exactly are you doing? I am tired of telling people you do computers." My mother stepped forward. Her face flushed. She looked terrified, as if I were about to announce a felony. She tried to intercept the question. "Oh, Mother, you know Lila," Marjorie said, her laugh high and brittle. "She is very private. She is still in that nice little apartment complex in Capital City, the one near the highway, and she is working for that tech support company, fixing servers. Right, Lila? Keeping the internet running for the rest of us." She looked at me, pleading with her eyes. "Be the background noise. Be the safe version. Do not make this awkward." I looked at my mother. I looked at Sienna, who was watching me with a mixture of boredom and suspicion. I looked at the room full of people who had spent 30 years looking through me. I decided to burn the box. "Actually, no," I said. I did not shout. I spoke with the volume I used in boardrooms. "I moved out of Capital City 5 years ago." My mother froze. "What?" "I live in Seattle now," I continued. "I am a senior director at Kestrel Ridge Systems. We handle high-level risk mitigation and cyber defense for Fortune 100 corporations. I don't fix servers. I manage security infrastructures that protect billions of dollars in assets." The silence in the room was absolute. It was a physical weight. "Seattle?" Aunt Linda asked, her voice squeaking. "But that is expensive." "It is," I agreed. "But where do you live?" my father asked, looking confused. "Rent must be astronomical." "I don't rent," I said. "I bought a penthouse in the Belltown district 2 years ago." I let the sentence hang there. Penthouse, bought, 2 years ago. I saw the words hit them like physical blows. My mother's mouth opened, but no sound came out. My father looked like he had been slapped, but it was Sienna who fascinated me. Her reaction was not shock. It was not pride. It was a micro-expression of pure, unadulterated calculation. Her eyes widened, and then narrowed instantly. I saw her look at my dress again, but this time, she wasn't judging the style. She was estimating the price tag. She was recalculating my value. I was no longer the broke sister. I was a resource. "You bought a penthouse?" Sienna repeated. Her voice was trembling, but she forced a smile onto her face. It was a terrifying grimace. "Lila! Oh my God! Why didn't you tell us? We've been worried about you. We thought you were struggling." "I know," I said. "I didn't correct you because I didn't think it mattered." "Didn't matter?" Sienna let out a laugh that sounded like glass breaking. "We are family. Your success is our success." The room exhaled. The tension broke, replaced by a sudden, voracious curiosity. The dynamic shifted so fast it made me dizzy. Suddenly, I was not the wallflower, I was the sun. Cousins who hadn't spoken to me in a decade swarmed forward. "Seattle? I love Seattle. We should come visit." "Risk mitigation? That sounds like a spy movie. Tell me about it." "I always knew you were the smart one, Lila. I always said that." I held my ground. I answered their questions with polite brevity. I watched my parents. They were not coming over to congratulate me. They were huddled together near the buffet, whispering furiously. My mother looked pale. My father looked agitated. They looked like people who had just realized they had thrown away a winning lottery ticket. Sienna did not leave my side. She hooked her arm through mine, claiming me. "I am so proud of you," she said, loudly enough for everyone to hear. "I always told people, my sister is a genius. Didn't I tell people that?" She hadn't. She had told people I was weird and antisocial. "I'm sure you did," I said dryly. "We have so much to catch up on," she whispered, leaning in close. Her breath smelled of champagne. "I have been thinking about expanding my brand. You know, taking it to the West Coast. Seattle has a great market for lifestyle influencers. We could be a power team." There it was. 5 minutes after learning I was not destitute, she was already drafting a business plan that involved my guest bedroom. "We can talk about it later," I said, extracting my arm. I needed air. I walked toward the bar, the crowd parting for me. People were looking at me differently now. It wasn't just respect. It was hunger. I was fresh meat. I was a potential investor. I was a connection. I ordered a sparkling water. As I waited, a man slid up next to me. It was Mr. Henderson. He was an old family friend, a real estate developer who played golf with my father. He had always been kind to me in a vague, absent-minded way. "Lila," he said, nodding. "That was quite a reveal. You really shook the tree." "Hello? Mr. Henderson," I said, just answering the question. He took a sip of his scotch. He looked at me, then over at my parents, who were still deep in their frantic conference. "You know," he said casually, swirling the ice in his glass. "It makes sense now." "What makes sense?" I asked. "The talk," he said. "I played around with your dad last Tuesday. He was talking big. Said the family was looking into acquiring some lakefront property, maybe a boat." I frowned. My parents had been complaining about money for years. They had just remortgaged their house to pay off Sienna's credit card debt. "My parents don't have lakefront money, Mr. Henderson," he chuckled. "Well, that is what I thought." But Dennis was very confident. He said, "The family assets are finally maturing." He said he had a silent partner in the family who was about to come through in a big way. He looked at me, his eyes crinkling. I assumed he was bluffing. "Mr. Henderson said, but seeing you now, I guess he wasn't. He must have known you were doing well. He made it sound like it was a done deal, like the money was already in the pot." My blood ran cold. I looked across the room at my father. He was looking at me. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't proud. He looked like a man who was calculating exactly how much equity was sitting in a penthouse in Seattle and figuring out how to frame the request. "He said that?" I asked, my voice very quiet. "Oh, yes." "Mr. Henderson said, oblivious to the ice forming in my veins. He said, "My retirement plan is finally coming home." Congratulated him on raising such a generous daughter. I stared at my father. He caught my eye and raised his glass in a toast. It wasn't a toast to my success. It was a toast to his payday. They hadn't known the details. They hadn't known about the penthouse or the specific job title, but they had known something, or maybe they had just assumed that if I had money, it was naturally theirs. The ghost had walked into the room, and they didn't see a person. They saw a bank vault that had finally been unlocked. "Excuse me," I said to Mr. Henderson. I turned away from the bar. The music seemed too loud. The lights seemed too bright. I looked at Sienna, who was now typing furiously on her phone, probably looking up real estate prices in my neighborhood. I looked at my mother, who was suddenly beaming at me, her fear replaced by a terrifying, predatory warmth. I had come here to prove I existed. I had succeeded, and in doing so, I had just painted a target on my own back. The morning after the party, my phone did not stop buzzing. It vibrated against the nightstand like a trapped insect, demanding to be let out. For 10 years, my phone had been a quiet device. I could go days without a personal notification, but now, the silence had been replaced by a deluge of affection that felt frantic, loud, and suspiciously well-timed. It started with Sienna. At 7:30 in the morning, I woke up to a stream of text messages that scrolled off the screen. Lila, I had the best time last night. I feel like we finally reconnected. Do you remember when we used to make forts in the living room? I was thinking about that all night. Miss you so much. Big sis. Coffee this morning? My treat? Well, my treat emotionally, LOL. Pick you up at 10? I stared at the words, Big sis. Sienna had not called me that since we were 12. For the last decade, she had referred to me either as Lila or when speaking to others. My sister, who does computers, the sudden intimacy felt like wearing a sweater that was slightly too tight, warm, but suffocating. I agreed to coffee. Part of me, the cynical risk analyst, knew this was a reconnaissance mission, but the other part of me, the part that had stood in the corner at Thanksgiving for 20 years holding a lukewarm water, just wanted to be invited. Sienna picked a coffee shop that was designed for Instagram. Exposed brick, neon signs, and lattes that cost $8. She arrived 5 minutes late, wearing oversized sunglasses and a look of tragic exhaustion. I am so dead, she said, sliding into the booth opposite me. Being an influencer is literally a 24-hour job. People think it is just taking pictures, but the engagement algorithms are brutal right now. Brutal. She ordered a matcha latte with oat milk and a croissant. I ordered black coffee. For the first 20 minutes, she love-bombed me. She complimented my skin. She asked about Seattle. Though her eyes glazed over when I mentioned the rain, she brought up childhood memories that I didn't recall happening quite the way she described them. In her version, we were partners in crime, inseparable allies against the world. In my memory, I was usually the one taking the blame while she smiled at our parents. Then came the pivot. It was smooth. I had to give her that. It is just so inspiring to see you doing so well, she sighed, tearing off a piece of her croissant. I wish I had your stability. Honestly, Lila, things have been really scary lately. I took a sip of my coffee. Scary how? Cash flow, she whispered, leaning in as if sharing a state secret. Brands are paying net 60 or net 90 these days. I have $3,000 coming in from a skincare collab, but it won't hit my account for 2 months, and my rent is due on Tuesday. The landlord is being a total nightmare about it. She looked up at me, her eyes wide and shimmering with unshed tears. I am terrified he's going to evict me, she said. Can you imagine? Me? Homeless? It would ruin my brand. I would lose everything. The number hung in the air. She wasn't asking for $1 million. She was asking for rent. It was a solvable problem. How much is the rent? I asked. $1,200, she said quickly. Well, $1,500 with the late fees, but I swear, Lila, the second that skincare money hits, I will wire it back to you. You know I'm good for it. I knew she wasn't. Sienna had never paid back a loan in her life. But looking at her, seeing that frantic edge beneath the polish, I felt a strange pull. I had the power to fix this. I could make her fear go away with 3 taps on my phone. I can cover it, I said. Sienna gasped. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Oh my God, Lila, you are literally my angel. Seriously, you saved my life. The rush of dopamine I felt when she said that was dangerous. It was addictive, for the first time. I wasn't the boring sister. I was the savior. I transferred $1,500 to her Venmo right there at the table. She watched the notification pop up on her screen and let out a squeal of delight. Best sister ever, she declared. That was the opening gate. Once the money started flowing, the rest of the family smelled it. My mother called me that afternoon. Her tone was completely different from the vague, distracted voice I was used to. She sounded bright, sharp, and proud. Lila, she chirped. I was just talking to Mrs. Higgins next door. I told her about your position at Kestrel Ridge. She was floored. I told her, my Lila has always been the brains of the operation. You should have seen her face. I held the phone tighter. I knew she had never said that before yesterday, but hearing it now, even knowing it was retroactive revisionism, Felt good. It soothed a wound I had been carrying since I was 6 years old. "That's nice of you to say, Mom," I said. "It is just the truth," she said. "We are so proud of you. Your father and I were just saying that we always knew you would go far. Listen, since you are in town, you should stop by the house. We want to make you dinner. Dad is grilling." I went to dinner. The house looked the same. Faded siding. A porch that leaned slightly to the left. But the atmosphere was transformed. I was seated at the head of the table. My father poured my wine. My mother served me the biggest steak. They asked me questions about my life, but they were specific kinds of questions. They didn't ask if I was happy. They didn't ask if I was lonely. They asked about the square footage of my penthouse. They asked what kind of car I drove in Seattle. They asked if I flew private or commercial. Then, over dessert, store-bought apple pie, my father cleared his throat. "You know," he said, leaning back in his chair and looking at the ceiling, "seeing you do so well, it really highlights how far behind we have fallen here. The economy has been rough on your old dad." "Is business slow?" I asked. He ran a small hardware supply company that had been struggling for as long as I had been alive. "It is the supply chain," he said, waving a hand. "And the house. This place is a money pit. Lila, the roof is leaking in the guest room. The furnace is on its last legs. Your mother is freezing at night." He looked at me. It was a heavy, meaningful look. "I hate to even mention it," he said, "but we are looking at a tough winter. I was going to take out a loan, but the rates are criminal right now. 8%. Can you believe that?" "How much is the furnace?" I asked. $4,000, my mother interjected, "for a decent one, plus installation. And the roof patch is another 2, my father added. So, call it 6,000, just to keep the place standing. $6,000. To me, that was a week's salary. To them, it was a mountain. "I can help with the furnace," I said. "I don't want Mom to be cold." "You are a good daughter," my father said, nodding solemnly. "A really good daughter. We will pay you back when the tax refund comes in." I wrote them a check. When I handed it to my father, he didn't just take it. He hugged me, a real, 2-armed hug. He patted my back. "Thank you, sweetheart," he said. I left the house feeling a warm glow in my chest. I told myself it was fine. I told myself I was just sharing my success. That is what families do, right? They help each other. But as the days went on, the pattern became a rhythm, and the rhythm became a trap. The warmth was conditional. I learned this quickly. If I answered a text immediately with a yes, I was flooded with heart emojis and love yous. If I waited 2 hours because I was in a meeting, or if I asked a clarifying question about why Sienna needed $300 for unexpected car maintenance when she didn't own a car. The silence was deafening. Sienna was the master of the guilt trip. "I know you are busy being a big shot," she texted me on Wednesday. "Must be nice to not worry about grocery prices. I am literally eating ramen for the 3rd night in a row, but it is fine. I am tough." I sent her $200 for groceries. "You are the best," came the reply. 3 seconds later, "Going to Whole Foods right now." The requests were always framed as temporary. They were bridge loans. They were emergencies. They were just until Friday. "You don't know what it is like to juggle everything," Sienna told me over the phone, after asking for money to pay a photographer. "You have your salary. You have your security. We are out here in the trenches. Lila, we are just trying to survive." I started to feel less like a sister and more like a human DATM. They never asked about my stress. I was managing a crisis at work involving a potential data breach in Singapore, working 18-hour days remotely from my hotel room. But whenever I mentioned being tired, they brushed it off. "Oh, but you are tired in a penthouse," Sienna would joke. "Try being tired in a studio apartment with a leaky faucet." My fatigue was a luxury. Their fatigue was a tragedy that required funding. By the end of the week, I had transferred nearly $12,000 to various family members. I had paid for rent, a furnace, groceries, a credit card minimum payment, and a business license renewal for my father that I was pretty sure did not cost $800. I was sitting in my hotel suite on Friday night, staring at my bank app. The numbers didn't hurt me financially. I could afford it. But something else was hurting. I realized that in 5 days of constant communication, not one person had asked me a single question about myself that didn't relate to my wallet. Nobody asked if I was seeing anyone. Nobody asked what I did for fun. Nobody asked why I had left 10 years ago and never come back. They only asked for my availability. My phone rang at 11 at night. I assumed it was Sienna, probably needing money for an Uber. It was Evelyn. "Hello, Grandma," I said, rubbing my temples. "Lila," she said. Her voice was low. She wasn't using her sharp, commanding tone. She sounded tired and sad. "Are you alone?" "Yes," I said. "I need to tell you something," she said, "and I need you to listen to me, and I need you to not make excuses for them." "What is it?" I asked. Sitting up. "I was at your parents' house tonight," Evelyn said. "They thought I was asleep in the sunroom. They were in the kitchen. Dennis, Marjorie, and Sienna." "Okay," I said. "And?" "I heard them talking about you," she said. "They have been really nice this week." "Grandma," I said, feeling defensive. "We are reconnecting." "Honey," Evelyn said, and the gentleness in her voice broke my heart before she even finished the sentence. They were not talking about reconnecting. They were talking about the renovations. Marjorie said, "We should ask for the kitchen next. She is in a giving mood." And Dennis laughed. He said, "We just have to keep telling her how proud we are. She eats it up. It is the easiest money I have ever made." I stopped breathing. The air in the hotel room felt suddenly very cold. "And Sienna?" I whispered. "Sienna said something worse," Evelyn said. "She said, 'Lila is so desperate to belong. She would pay for my entire wedding if I asked her to. We just have to keep her close until the bills are paid.'" I closed my eyes. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, hot and fast. "They are not reconnecting, Lila," Evelyn said softly. "They are harvesting, and it wasn't love I heard in that kitchen. It was greed." The phone felt heavy in my hand, like a stone I had picked up from the bottom of a river. Evelyn's voice on the other end was not the voice of the matriarch who commanded ballrooms. It was the voice of a witness who had seen something ugly and wished she hadn't. "Tell me everything," I said. My voice was steady. It was the voice I used when a client told me they had been hacked, and I needed the exact timestamp of the breach. "Don't protect me. Grandma, I need the transcript." Evelyn hesitated, the silence stretching for 5 seconds, then 6. "They were in the sunroom," she began, her voice cracking slightly. "They had opened that second bottle of wine you brought, the vintage Cabernet. Dennis was pouring it. I heard the cork pop. He said, 'I can't believe we didn't tap this well sooner. I feel like an idiot for letting her sit out there in Seattle for 10 years without checking the balance sheet.'" I stared at the wall of my hotel suite. The wallpaper was a subtle damask pattern. I focused on a single swirl of gold thread. "And Mom?" I asked. "Marjorie was laughing," Evelyn said. She said, "Well, we have her now. We just have to be smart about it. We can't ask for the kitchen renovation yet. That is too big. We have to pace it. We don't want to spook the golden goose before we get the eggs." The golden goose, a creature kept solely for what it could produce, then discarded when it stopped laying. "But it was Sienna," Evelyn continued, and her tone dropped an octave, becoming hard and flat. "It was Sienna who really twisted the knife. Lila, Dennis was worried you might say no to the next request. He was worried you might get suspicious. And Sienna, she just laughed. It was that high, tinkling laugh she uses when she thinks she is being charming." Evelyn took a breath. Sienna said, "Don't worry, Dad. You are overthinking it. Lila is easy. She is pathetic. Honestly, She is so desperate to be part of this family that she would pay for my entire wardrobe if I told her it would make us sisters again. She just wants to belong. That is her weakness. We just have to let her sit at the table, and she will pay for the dinner. She is paying for the privilege of us tolerating her." The world did not stop spinning. The lights in the hotel room did not flicker, but inside my chest, something vital and soft, something I had been guarding for 32 years, quietly died. "She said I was paying for the privilege of being tolerated," I repeated. "Yes," Evelyn said. And then they toasted. I heard the glasses clink. I didn't cry. Crying implies shock, or grief, or a sudden, overwhelming wave of emotion. This wasn't that. This was clarity. It was the cold, sterile clarity of a forensic audit. It was the feeling of looking at a spreadsheet and finally finding the row where the numbers didn't add up, and realizing the error wasn't a mistake, it was theft. "Thank you, Grandma," I said. "Lila, honey," she said, panic creeping into her voice. "What are you going to do? Are you going down there? Do you want me to come over?" "No," I said. "I am going to sleep. I have a busy day tomorrow." "You are not going to confront them?" "No," I said. "Confrontation is for people who want to fix the relationship. I don't fix bad investments. Grandma, I liquidate them." I hung up the phone. I walked to the window and looked out at the dark street below. I realized, with a terrifying precision, that Sienna was right. I was easy. I did just want to belong. I had spent the last week acting like a starving animal that had finally been thrown a scrap of meat. I had wagged my tail. I had performed. I had written checks because I thought I was purchasing love. But I wasn't purchasing love. I was purchasing a subscription to a fantasy. I was buying tickets to a play where I was the only audience member, and the actors were laughing at me from behind the curtain. I slept for 3 hours. When I woke up, the morning light was gray and unforgiving. I ordered coffee. I sat at the desk in the suite and opened my laptop. I logged into my bank account. I looked at the transfers from the past week. Sienna Nelson, $1,500. Dennis Nelson, $4,000. Marjorie Nelson, $200. Sienna Nelson, $300. It looked like a hemorrhage. I could have gone to their house that morning. I could have screamed. I could have thrown the wine in their faces. I could have recited Sienna's words back to her and watched her face crumble. But that would have given them an out. They would have called me dramatic. They would have gaslit me. They would have said Evelyn heard it wrong, that it was a joke, that I was being sensitive Lila again. They would have made me the villain. I decided to run a diagnostic test instead. In the security world, when we suspect a system has been compromised by an insider threat, we don't immediately fire the employee. We restrict their access. We cut off the data flow and observe their behavior. We wait to see if they try to bypass the firewall. I was going to stop the money, but I wasn't going to stop the nice. I was going to be the sweetest, warmest, most available sister and daughter in the world. I was going to remove money from the equation entirely and see what was left. If there was any love there, even a microscopic amount, it would survive the absence of cash. If there wasn't, well, then the system would crash. The first test came at 10 o'clock that morning. Sienna sent me a text. It was a link to a pair of designer boots. "Lila, look at these. They are literally perfect for my autumn vibes shoot next week. But the price tag is criminal. Crying face emoji. If only I had a rich fairy godmother. Wink emoji." The price was $800. Normally, or rather, the normal of the last 5 days, I would have replied, "Ordered them for you. Good luck with the shoot." Instead, I typed, "Those are gorgeous. I love that color. It will look great with your complexion. You should definitely save up for them. They look like a great investment piece." I hit send. I watched the 3 dots of her typing bubble appear immediately. Then they disappeared. Then they appeared again. Then they stopped. She didn't know how to respond. I had complimented her. I had been encouraging. I just hadn't opened my wallet. 10 minutes later, she replied, "Yeah, totally. Just so stressed about money right now, you know? It is hard to save when you are drowning. I replied, I hear you. The economy is tough, but I believe in your talent. You will figure it out. Love you. Silence. The next test came from my father around noon. He called me. Hey, kiddo, he said. The warmth was dialed up to 11. Your mother and I were thinking about that trip to the coast we used to take. You know, the one to the cabin? We haven't been in years. The rental prices are just sky high now. $2,000 for a weekend? It is robbery. He paused. He was leaving the door wide open for me to walk through and say, Let me book it for you. That sounds like such a nice memory. Dad, I said, keeping my voice bright. I remember those trips. The beach was always so cold. But we had fun. Yeah, he said. He waited. The silence stretched. We were hoping to go next month, for your mother's mental health. She has been down lately. Well, I hope you guys can make it work, I said. Mom deserves a break. Maybe you can find a deal on Airbnb? Sometimes they have off-season discounts. Right, he said. His voice had lost its buoyancy. It sounded flat, confused. Yeah, discounts. I will look into that. Great. Let me know if you find a good spot. Maybe I can drive down and visit for a day. Sure, he said. I have to go. The game is starting. He hung up without saying goodbye. For the next 3 days, I played the game perfectly. I was present. I answered every text within 5 minutes. I sent funny memes to the group chat. I liked every single one of Sienna's posts. I was the model of a loving, engaged family member. I just didn't pay for anything. The change in the atmosphere was fascinating. In a morbid way, it was like watching a flower wilt in time-lapse photography. By Tuesday, the good morning, sunshine texts from Sienna had stopped. By Wednesday, my mother stopped calling to tell me how proud the neighbors were of me. By Thursday, the group chat was silent. The mask was slipping. Without the lubricant of my money, the gears of their affection were grinding to a halt. They didn't know how to interact with me if I wasn't a transaction. The requests began to change. They stopped being direct asks wrapped in cute stories. They became passive-aggressive spikes. Sienna posted a story on Instagram, a black screen with white text. It is funny how people change when they get a little bit of power. Some people forget where they came from. Fake family hashtag first. She didn't tag me. She didn't have to. My mother called me on Friday. Lila, she said, her voice tight. Sienna is very upset. Oh no, I said. What happened? She really needed those boots for her career, Marjorie said. She feels like you are not supporting her, after everything she has done to welcome you back into the fold. Welcome me back? I asked. Mom, I have been here the whole time, and I am supporting her. I am her biggest fan. I just told her to save up for them. That is good advice, isn't it? It is not about advice, Lila, my mother snapped. It is about generosity. You have so much, and she has so little. It just seems cold. We thought you had changed. We thought you wanted to be part of the family again. There it was, the threat. Pay up, or you are out. I am part of the family. Mom, I said gently. Unless membership requires a monthly fee? Is that what you're saying? Don't be ridiculous, she said, flustered. I am just saying, it would be nice if you shared your blessings, that is all. It must be nice to not worry about anything. I worry about a lot of things, I said. But you are right, I am blessed. Well, she said, I hope you enjoy your penthouse. She hung up. I sat in the silence of my hotel room. It was done. The diagnostic was complete. The system was corrupted beyond repair. They didn't want me. They wanted the line of credit I represented. The moment the credit was declined, the love evaporated. I packed my bags. I was scheduled to fly back to Seattle the next morning. I was done. I was going to go home, block their numbers, and move on. I had my answer. But the universe, or perhaps just Sienna's audacity, had one final twist in store. My phone pinged. It was a text from Sienna. I expected an angry rant. I expected a demand. I expected a link to a GoFundMe for her emotional distress. Instead, it was a digital invitation. It was animated. Little snowflakes fell across the screen, revealing a picture of a golden turkey and a Christmas tree. The Nelson Family Holiday. Spectacular. December 24th to 26th. Hosted by Dennis and Marjorie. Underneath the graphic. Sienna had written a message. Lila, I am so sorry for being moody earlier. I am just stressed. Forgive me? Pleading face emoji. We really want you to come for the big holiday gathering this year. It is going to be huge. All the cousins, everyone. We want to do a special toast to you and your success. Please say you will come? It wouldn't be Christmas without you. We have a huge surprise planned for you. Heart emoji. I stared at the screen. The tone was wrong. It was too eager. It was too sweet. It was frantic. It was the tone of a salesperson trying to close a deal before the end of the quarter. A surprise. A special toast. My stomach turned over. They weren't done. They had realized that the passive-aggressive approach hadn't worked, so they were pivoting back to the love bombing. But this felt different. This felt like a setup. Why would they want me there so badly? After I had cut off the funds, why the sudden surprise? I thought about Evelyn's warning. They are harvesting. They weren't inviting me to celebrate. They were inviting me because they needed me in the room for something. They needed the prop back on stage. They had a plan. And I was the centerpiece. It was a trap. I could smell it. It smelled like cinnamon and desperation. I should have said no. I should have deleted the text and boarded my flight. But I looked at the words, huge surprise. I am a risk analyst. I don't like unknown variables. If I walked away now, I would always wonder what they were planning. I would always wonder how far they were willing to go. I needed to know the ending of the story. I typed back, I'll be there. The driveway was packed with cars, a Tetris game of sedans and SUVs that signaled the full mobilization of the Nelson clan. I parked my rental at the very end of the street, half a block away. It gave me a moment to breathe the cold December air before entering the blast radius. I walked up the driveway at 6 o'clock sharp. The house was glowing. Every window was ablaze with warm light, and a wreath the size of a tractor tire hung on the front door. It looked like a greeting card. It looked like a sanctuary. But I knew better. It was a stage set, and the actors were already in makeup. I opened the door and was immediately hit by a wall of heat and the smell of cinnamon, cloves, and expensive perfume. She is here! The announcement came from my mother, Marjorie. She was standing in the foyer, wearing a red velvet dress that I knew she had bought specifically for tonight. She rushed toward me, arms outstretched, moving with a speed that defied her usual complaints about joint pain. Lila! She exclaimed, pulling me into a hug that smelled of hairspray and desperation. Oh, look at you. You look frozen. Come in, let me take your coat. She didn't just take my coat. She peeled it off me with the reverence of a servant attending to royalty. Then she looped her arm through mine, her grip tight, proprietary. Everyone, she announced to the crowded living room. Lila is here. My big city girl made it. The room turned. Aunts, uncles, cousins, the same people who had stared at me in shock at the birthday party, now beamed with a synchronized warmth. It was unsettling. It was the kind of exaggerated welcome you give to a distant relative who has just won the lottery. Marjorie paraded me through the room. She kept touching me, patting my hand, smoothing my sleeve, resting her head on my shoulder for a split second. She works so hard, Marjorie told Aunt Linda, who was nodding vigorously. High-level security, very important work. We hardly see her because she is so in demand, but she always makes time for family. Don't you, sweetie? She looked at me, her eyes wide and glassy. She was auditioning for sainthood. She was rewriting history in real time, casting herself as the supportive matriarch of a close-knit brood. using me as the prop to prove it. I try, I said, my voice neutral. I extricated myself from her grip and moved toward the kitchen. My father, Dennis, was there, mixing drinks with a heavy hand. "Lila," he boomed. "There she is, the MVP." He handed me a glass of wine without asking what I wanted. It was the good stuff, not the box wine they usually served. "Thanks, Dad," I said. He leaned against the counter, blocking my exit. He swirled his drink, his eyes scanning my face with a look I recognized from corporate negotiations. It wasn't fatherly concern, it was due diligence. "So," he said, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial rumble, "how is the market treating you? I saw the tech sector took a little dip last week. Nothing that affects your level, I assume." "We are stable," I said. "Risk mitigation is usually recession-proof. People get more scared when money is tight, not less." "Smart," he said, nodding appreciatively. "Very smart. That is what I always liked about you, Lila. You think ahead. You have liquidity. That is key in this economy. Liquidity." He said the word liquidity like it was a prayer. "I was reading about these new tax shelters for family trusts," he continued, watching me closely. "Seems like a smart play for someone in your bracket. Keeps the assets in the bloodline. You know, protects the legacy." "I have a financial advisor who handles that," I said. Taking a sip of the wine, it tasted like oak and metal. Sure, he said quickly. "But you know, sometimes outside advisors don't understand the nuances of a family's needs. Sometimes you need to keep things in-house." He winked, a literal wink. I felt a wave of nausea. He wasn't bonding with me. He was pitching me. He was testing the waters to see if I was open to a merger. I excused myself and walked into the living room. Sienna was there, holding cord on the rug near the fireplace. She was wearing a white cashmere sweater dress that looked incredibly soft and incredibly impractical for a party with red wine and cranberry sauce. "Lila," she cried out, waving me over. "Come sit. I was just telling Cousin Mark about your penthouse. Mark, tell her. Doesn't it sound insane?" Mark, a 22-year-old who still lived in his parents' basement, looked at me with wide eyes. "Is it true you have an elevator that opens right into your living room?" "It is," I said, sitting on the edge of the ottoman, keeping my distance. "Goals," Sienna sighed, leaning back on her hands. "Literal goals. I am just over here trying to manifest that kind of energy. It is so hard. Though, you know, the hustle is real." She looked at me, her expression shifting seamlessly from admiration to victimhood. "I had to turn down this amazing trip to Tulum next month," she said, loud enough for the circle to hear. "It was going to be a huge networking opportunity for my brand. But, you know, budget cuts, adulting is trash." She let out a tragic little laugh. "But I am happy for you, Lila," she added, reaching out to squeeze my knee. "Seriously. At least one of us is thriving. It makes me feel better knowing that the Nelson name is on a deed somewhere, even if it isn't mine." It was a masterclass in manipulation. She praised me while simultaneously highlighting the disparity between us, inviting everyone else to feel sorry for her and slightly resentful of me. She was positioning herself as the martyr and me as the hoarder. I watched her, and for the first time, I didn't feel the urge to fix it. I didn't feel the guilt she was trying to inject into my veins. I just felt cold. I realized we weren't having a conversation. We were playing a game of chess, and she thought I didn't know the rules. Dinner was an endurance test. The table was set with the good china, the silver that only came out for funerals and weddings. Marjorie placed me in the center, flanked by herself and Dennis, pinning me in. Throughout the meal, the compliments kept coming. They were aggressive, relentless. "Lila bought this wine. Everyone, isn't it smooth?" Lila is thinking about getting a new car. She has such great taste. "Lila, tell them about your bonus structure. It is fascinating." They were serving me up to the family on a silver platter. Not as a person, but as a resource. "Look what we caught." They were saying, "Look how fat the goose is." I ate my turkey. I smiled. I said very little. After dessert, a pumpkin cheesecake that Sienna claimed she made, but which I recognized from a local bakery box in the trash, Marjorie clapped her hands. "Okay, everyone," she announced. "Let's move to the living room. Coffee and brandy. We want to have a little family time." The guests who weren't immediate family took the hint and drifted toward the kitchen or the patio. The core group, Marjorie, Dennis, Sienna, and me, settled into the plush armchairs near the fire. It felt staged. The lighting was dimmed. The music was turned down. Dennis cleared his throat. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, clasping his hands together. "Lila," he started. His voice was serious, heavy with a manufactured gravity. "We wanted to talk to you because we love you and because we are a family." "Okay," I said. I set my coffee cup down on the coaster. "What is this about?" "It is about the future," Marjorie said softly, from the sofa where she was stroking Sienna's hair. "We have been doing a lot of thinking since your grandmother's party. Seeing you so successful, it made us realize something." "What did it make you realize?" I asked. "That we need to secure the family's foundation," Dennis said. "We are getting older. Lila, the house needs work. Sienna is just launching her career. And you are out there all alone in Seattle." He paused. Waiting for me to agree that I was lonely, I didn't. "We came up with an idea," Sienna piped up, her voice hopeful and bright. "A family investment fund. We pool our resources. Well, mostly your resources initially, but we all manage it. We fix the house, we launch my brand properly, and we create a safety net for Mom and Dad. And in return, you get to be the head of the family in a way. You get to be the one who made it all happen. It brings us all together," Marjorie added. "No more separate bank accounts. No more worrying. Just us, taking care of each other." They looked at me, 3 pairs of eyes, shining with anticipation. They thought they had nailed the pitch. They thought they were offering me the one thing I couldn't buy: belonging. I looked at them. I looked at the fire crackling in the hearth. "So," I said slowly, "the plan is that I fund everything, and you guys spend it? And in exchange, I get the title of head of the family?" "It is not like that," Sienna laughed, a nervous tinkle. "It is a partnership. We bring the love. You bring the capital. That is fair, isn't it?" "We just want you close, honey," Marjorie said. "We missed you." The room went quiet. They were waiting for the check. They were waiting for the yes. I took a deep breath. The air tasted of wood smoke and lies. "It is funny you use that word," I said. My voice was calm, conversational. "Close," Dennis frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean," I said, "that I heard about a conversation you 3 had recently, in the sunroom, over a bottle of my Cabernet." The silence that fell over the room was instant and absolute. It was the silence of a vacuum. Sienna stopped stroking her hair. Marjorie went perfectly still. Dennis's jaw tightened. "I don't know what you are talking about," Dennis said, but his eyes darted to Marjorie. "I think you do," I said. "You were celebrating. You were talking about the golden goose. You were talking about how easy I was." I turned my gaze to Sienna. She looked like she had been slapped. "And you?" I said to her. "You said something very specific. You said I was so desperate to belong that I would pay for the privilege of being tolerated. You said I would pay for your entire life just to have a seat at this table." Sienna's face turned a blotchy, ugly red. I never said that. You are crazy." "Did I hear it wrong?" I asked. "Did you not say that we just had to keep me close until the bills were paid?" "Who told you that?" Marjorie shrieked. Her mask of sainthood shattered, revealing the panic underneath. "Was it Mother? She is senile. She makes things up. You can't trust a word she says." "She is not senile," I said. "And looking at your faces right now, I know she didn't make it up. It was a joke, Marjorie cried out. She stood up, her hands waving frantically. For God's sake, Lila, it was just a joke. We were drinking. Families say things. You are too sensitive. You always have been. Yeah, Dennis said, his voice rising to a shout, trying to regain control of the room. You are taking this out of context. We were just blowing off steam. After everything we have done for you tonight, after this dinner, you are going to throw a rumor in our faces? It wasn't a rumor, I said. It was a strategy meeting. You are being paranoid, Sienna spat. God, this is exactly why we didn't tell you things before. Because you get all weird and intense. You think your money makes you better than us? No, I said. I think my money makes you interested in me. And I think without it, I am just background noise again. That is not true, Marjorie sobbed. We love you. You love the upgrades, I corrected her. I stood up. The movement was sudden, and they flinched, as if I were about to strike them. I walked over to the chair where Marjorie had placed my coat. I picked it up. It was a long black wool trench coat. I put it on, buttoning it slowly, methodically. Lila, sit down, Dennis commanded. We are not done discussing this. I am, I said. I tied the belt of my coat. I looked at them one last time. They looked small. They looked greedy. They looked like strangers. Where are you going? Sienna asked, her voice shrill with panic. You can't just leave. It is Christmas. I am going back to my hotel, I said. And then I am going back to Seattle. I walked to the doorway. I paused and turned back to face them. The firelight cast long shadows across their faces. You were right about one thing, Sienna, I said. I did want to belong. I wanted it more than anything. I was willing to pay a high price for it. I pulled my leather gloves out of my pocket. But I canceled the subscription, I said. I am done funding a fantasy that excludes me. You guys are on your own. Lila, Marjorie screamed. If you walk out that door, do not expect us to come crawling after you. I don't, I said. I expect you to call me when the furnace breaks, but I won't answer. I opened the door. The cold air rushed in, biting and clean. I stepped out into the night and closed the door behind me. I didn't slam it. I just shut it. The silence of the street was beautiful. It sounded like freedom. I expected the explosion. When you walk out of a family gathering on Christmas Eve, leaving a room full of people who view you as a walking ATM, you expect the fallout to be nuclear. I anticipated angry voicemails from my father, guilt-ridden text messages from my mother, and public social media meltdowns from Sienna involving vague quotes about betrayal and toxic people. I prepared my defenses. I blocked their numbers on my personal cell. I set up filters on my email. I alerted the concierge at my building to turn away any visitors from out of state. But the explosion never came. Instead, there was silence. It was not the peaceful silence of resolution. It was the heavy, pressurized silence of a submarine diving too deep. It was clean. It was surgical. It felt less like I had been disowned and more like I had been deleted. For 3 weeks, there was absolutely zero contact, no attempts to bridge the gap, no requests for money, no apologies. It was as if the Nelson family had simply cauterized the wound and moved on. I returned to Seattle and threw myself into my work at Kestrel Ridge. The silence began to feel like a victory. I told myself they had finally understood the boundary. I told myself they were too embarrassed to reach out. I began to relax. I went to yoga. I drank my coffee looking out at the rain without a knot of dread in my stomach. I should have known better. In my line of work, total radio silence from a hostile actor is never a sign of retreat. It is a sign of redeployment. On a Tuesday afternoon in late January, the other shoe dropped. I was in my office, reviewing a threat assessment for a client in the banking sector. When my desk phone rang, it was an internal line, transferred from the main switchboard. Lila Nelson speaking, I said. Ms. Nelson, good afternoon. A smooth male voice answered. This is Marcus Thorne. I am a talent acquisition partner with Halcyon Global in New York. We haven't met, but I have been following your career at Kestrel Ridge with great interest. Hello, Marcus? I said, leaning back in my chair. Headhunters called often. It was part of the ecosystem. I am flattered, but I am very happy with my current position. I assumed as much, he said, and there was a strange, hesitant pause in his voice. Actually, I wasn't calling to recruit you for a standard role. I was calling to inquire about your new venture. I saw the press release for the Nelson Consulting Group, and I was intrigued by the hybrid family corporate security model you are advertising. It is a fascinating concept. I froze. My hand gripped the receiver so hard my knuckles turned white. I am sorry, I said, my voice carefully neutral. What venture are you referring to? The Nelson Consulting Group, Marcus said. I stumbled across the website this morning. It lists you as the executive partner and chief strategy officer. I assumed you were transitioning out of Kestrel Ridge to launch your own firm? The site says you are accepting high net worth clients for February. The room seemed to tilt on its axis. The air conditioning vent above me suddenly sounded like a jet engine. Marcus, I said, keeping the tremor out of my voice, can you give me the URL for that website? He gave it to me. I typed it into my browser. Thank you. Marcus, I said, I have to go. I hung up without waiting for his reply. I stared at the screen. The website was sleek. It was professionally designed, using a palette of navy blue and slate gray, colors that mimic the branding of top-tier security firms. Including Kestrel Ridge, the logo was a stylized N that looked like a shield, and there, on the landing page, was my face. It was a photo from 3 years ago, taken at a cousin's wedding. I was wearing a black blazer over a cocktail dress. They had cropped the photo tightly, removing the background and the wine glass I'd been holding, making it look like a professional headshot. My expression, which had been one of mild boredom at the wedding, now looked serious and authoritative. Underneath the photo, the text read, Lila Nelson, executive partner, with over a decade of experience leading global risk strategies for Fortune 500 companies. Lila Nelson brings elite enterprise protection to the private sector. As the spearhead of the Nelson Consulting Group, she ensures your assets are secured by industry-leading protocols. I scrolled down. My resume, or a warped, inflated version of it, was plastered across the About Us page. They had listed my certifications. They had listed my actual clients, which was a breach of confidentiality that could get me fired. They had taken the truth of my career and twisted it into a marketing hook for a company that did not exist. But it wasn't just me. Next to my photo was a picture of my father, Dennis. He was wearing a suit I had never seen him own. Dennis Nelson, Senior Managing Director, 30 years of business logistics and operational excellence, and Sienna Nelson, Director of Client Relations, specializing in high-touch reputation management and digital footprint security. I felt a wave of nausea so violent I had to close my eyes. They hadn't just stolen my money, they were skinning me. They were wearing my reputation like a suit to trick people into giving them money. I looked at the contact information. The address was a P.O. box in Oakhaven. The phone number was a local area code I recognized. I grabbed my cell phone. I didn't block my number. I wanted them to know it was me. I dialed the number listed on the website. It rang twice. Nelson Consulting Group. How may we direct your call? It was my father's voice, but it wasn't the voice he used at the hardware store. It was a lower, smoother, affected tone. He was role-playing. He was playing the part of the senior managing director. Dad, I said. My voice was ice. There was a silence on the other end. A fumble of plastic, as if he had dropped the phone. Lila, he said. His voice shifted instantly, losing the professional veneer and cracking into panic. Lila, we weren't expecting you to call this line. I bet you weren't, I said. Take the website down. Now. Now. Hold on, he stammered. Let's not be hasty. This is a soft launch. We were going to tell you. We wanted to surprise you with the finished product. Surprise me? I asked. You are using my name, my photo, and my credentials to solicit business. That is fraud. Dad, that is identity theft. Do you have any idea what you are doing? We are building a legacy, he shouted, his fear turning into defensive anger. You said you were done funding us. Fine. So we decided to build something ourselves. We are using the family assets. You are family. Your name is an asset. It is the only thing of value we have access to. My name is not a community garden, I snapped. It is my professional identity. You are listing me as an executive partner. I work for Kestrel Ridge. I signed a non-compete agreement. If my compliance officer sees this website, I will be terminated immediately. You are destroying my career. You are overreacting, he said dismissively. It is just marketing. Lila, everyone puffs up their resume a little bit. We haven't even taken any real clients yet. We are just networking, generating leads. It is harmless. Harmless? I looked at the services page. They were offering cyber audit packages starting at $5,000. You are selling services you cannot provide. Who is going to perform a cyber audit? Dad? You? You can't even find the solitaire icon on your iPad. We would outsource it, he yelled. That is what consultants do. We bring in the business using the name, and then we find people to do the work. It is a standard business model. It is a scam, I said. I am giving you 1 hour. If that site is not dark in 60 minutes, I am calling the authorities. You wouldn't, he said. We are your parents. Watch me, I said. I hung up. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from adrenaline. I had treated them like a nuisance family member. I had underestimated them. I thought they were moochers. They were actually criminals. 10 seconds later, my phone rang again. It was Sienna. You can't call the police, she sobbed immediately. She sounded hysterical. Lila, please, you don't understand. I understand perfectly, I said. You couldn't get my money, so you decided to sell my credibility. Who built the site? Sienna? Was it you? It looks like your aesthetic. I just made the template, she cried. Dad wrote the copy. Look, we were desperate, okay? Dad's business is completely under. The bank was going to take the house in February. We needed a way to get cash fast. We needed investors. So you invented a consulting firm? We tried to get loans, she wailed. Nobody would lend to us, but then Dad met this developer, and he mentioned you. He asked if you were involved in the family business, and Dad just said yes, and the guy's eyes lit up. He said he would be interested in retaining a firm that had Kestrel Ridge DNA. We didn't mean to hurt you. We just needed the credibility. We needed them to think you were backing us. I closed my eyes. Sienna, listen to me very carefully. Did you take money from anyone? What? Did anyone pay you? I asked, enunciating every word. Did you sign any contracts? Did you take any retainers? I don't know, she stammered. Dad handles the finances. I just run the social media. Sienna, I said, if you took money for services you cannot provide, using my name as the guarantee, that is wire fraud. That is federal prison time. Tell me the truth. There was one guy, she whispered. Her voice was so small I could barely hear it. The developer, Mr. Henderson, he gave Dad a deposit for a security sweep of his new properties. Mr. Henderson, the man at the party, the man I had spoken to. How much? I asked. $10,000, she said. My stomach dropped to the floor. $10,000. They had taken $10,000 from a family friend based on the lie that I was going to secure his buildings. And where's the money? I asked. Dad used it to pay the mortgage arrears, she said, and to pay for the website design. I ended the call. I couldn't listen to her anymore. I sat in my office. The silence was gone. The noise in my head was deafening. They had crossed the line from emotional manipulation into actionable criminal liability, and they had dragged me into the center of it. I needed legal counsel, not the corporate lawyers at Kestrel Ridge. If I told them, they would have to open an investigation into me. I needed my own shark. I dialed the number of a lawyer I had met at a conference last year, a specialist in defamation and corporate identity theft. "This is Sarah Jenkins," the voice answered. "Sarah, it is Lila Nelson." I said, "I have a situation. It involves familial identity theft and potential wire fraud." "Talk to me," she said, her tone shifting instantly to professional sharpness. I explained everything: the website, the fake title, the deposit from Mr. Henderson, the fact that my father had answered the phone as a director of the fake company. "Okay," Sarah said when I finished. "First, we send a cease and desist immediately. But Lila, you need to brace yourself. The website is the least of your problems." "What do you mean?" I asked. "If they took a deposit from Mr. Henderson," Sarah said, "they likely signed an engagement letter or a contract to get that money released. And if they are listing you as an executive partner, and your father is acting as a managing director," she paused. "Lila, there is a very high probability that they forged your signature on that contract to make it valid," she said. At the very least, the contract implies your direct involvement. If they default on that work, which they will, Mr. Henderson isn't just going to sue them. He is going to sue the firm. And since you are the only person on that masthead with any assets, he is going to come after you." I looked out the window at the Seattle skyline. The rain was coming down harder now, washing the city in gray. "They signed my name," I whispered. "We have to assume they did," Sarah said. "The damage isn't potential anymore, Lila. It is already in motion. We are not preventing a fire. We are standing in the middle of one." I hung up the phone. I looked at the website one last time before I closed the tab. I looked at my own face, staring back at me with confident, knowing eyes. I had spent my whole life trying to get my family to see me. Now, they finally saw me. They saw me as a commodity. They saw me as a shield. And they were going to use me until there was nothing left but a scapegoat. The digital paper trail was not just a footprint. It was a roadmap to a crime scene. After discovering the website, I spent the next 48 hours doing what I do best. I dug. I didn't sleep. I drank black coffee that turned cold in the mug while I scoured the dark corners of the local business internet. What I found made the website look like a harmless prank. The website was just the storefront. The real horror was happening in the back office. I found a PDF hosted on an unsecured cloud server that my father had used for his hardware store invoices. It was titled Nelson_strategic_growth_proposal_V3. I opened it. It was a pitch deck, a formal presentation document designed to woo investors. Page 1 was standard corporate fluff. Page 2 was the mission statement. Page 3 was the kill shot. It was a document titled Letter of Intent, and at the bottom, there was a signature. It was my signature. It was a clumsy forgery. The loops on the L were too wide. The slant was wrong. But to an untrained eye, it looked authoritative. The document stated that Lila Nelson, executive partner, personally guaranteed all initial consulting contracts with her private equity and professional licensure. They weren't just using my resume to look impressive. They were pledging my actual career and my bank account as collateral for their loans. They were telling local business owners that if the Nelson Consulting Group failed to deliver, I would personally write a check to cover the losses. They had turned me into an insurance policy without my consent. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. This was no longer just about family dysfunction. This was about liability. If they defaulted on these contracts, and they inevitably would, because they had no ability to perform the services, I would be on the hook. Creditors wouldn't just sue my father's shell company. They would come for my penthouse, my retirement accounts, and my standing at Kestrel Ridge. Then the phone rang. It wasn't a recruiter this time. The caller ID displayed a name I recognized from my childhood. Vance Automotive. Bill Vance owned the largest chain of car dealerships in the Tri-County area. He was a man who played golf with the mayor and had a reputation for litigation. I stared at the phone. If I didn't answer, it looked suspicious. If I answered and said the wrong thing, I could implicate myself in a conspiracy. I picked up. "This is Lila Nelson." "Lila, Bill Vance here," his voice boomed, cordial but edged with an underlying impatience. "Sorry to bug you on a workday. I know you are busy running the empire up there in Seattle." "Hello, Mr. Vance?" I said. My voice sounded calm, detached, as if I were observing the conversation from across the room. "What can I do for you?" "Well, I was just calling to check on the timeline," he said. "Your dad, Dennis, he picked up the retainer check last Tuesday, $15,000. He said you would have the initial vulnerability assessment done by this Friday. I just wanted to make sure we are still on track for that. My IT guys are asking when you need access to the servers." The room went silent. The only sound was the hum of my laptop fan. $15,000. They had taken $15,000 from Bill Vance. And they had promised him that I, Lila Nelson, senior director at Kestrel Ridge, would be performing a vulnerability assessment on his network by Friday. I had never seen his network. I had never agreed to this. A scream rose in my throat, a primal sound of rage and terror. I swallowed it down. If I told Bill Vance right now that my father was a fraud, Vance would call the police within 10 minutes. My father would be arrested. The local news would pick it up. Local family and high-stakes scam. Kestrel Ridge would find out. I would be suspended pending an investigation. But if I played along, I was an accomplice to wire fraud. "Mr. Vance," I said, choosing my words with the precision of a bomb disposal technician. "I am currently reviewing the intake files for all new accounts. There seems to be an administrative lag in the paperwork reaching my desk in Seattle. Can I verify something? Did you sign a service agreement?" "Sure did," Vance said. "Dennis brought it over. Had your signature on it already. Countersigned it right there?" My signature. "I see," I said. "Mr. Vance, I'm going to have to call you back before the end of the business day. I need to clarify a compliance issue with the local office." "Compliance?" Vance's tone shifted. The warmth evaporated. "Is there a problem, Lila? Because 15 grand is not small change. I expect premium service for that kind of money. There is no problem that cannot be resolved," I lied. "I will be in touch shortly." I hung up. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely type. I called Sarah Jenkins. "They forged my signature," I said the moment she answered. "Bill Vance, $15,000 retainer. He thinks I'm auditing his servers on Friday." "Okay," Sarah said. Her voice was steel. "The strategy shifts now. We are past cease and desist. We are in damage control mode. We need to file a police report for identity theft immediately to establish a timeline that proves you were not involved." "A police report?" I asked. "Sarah, that means arresting my father." "Lila," she said sharply, "he signed your name to a contract and took $15,000. That is a felony. If you do not report it, and Vance sues, a jury will look at that signature and look at your hesitation, and they will decide you were part of it until the deal went south. You have to choose. It is his reputation or your freedom." I closed my eyes. I saw my father's face at the dinner table, raising a glass of wine I had paid for. I saw Sienna smiling as she talked about her brand. "Draft the statement," I said, "and send the takedown orders. Scorched earth. I will have the papers served to your parents' house by a private process server within 3 hours," Sarah said. "Do not answer their calls until I tell you to." 3 hours later, my phone lit up. It started with a text from my mother. "There is a man at the door with papers. He says he is serving a lawsuit. Lila, what is going on?" Then a missed call from Dennis. Then another. Then a voicemail. I didn't answer. I sat in my office, watching the rain streak the glass, feeling like an executioner. Finally, a voicemail from my father appeared. I transcribed it rather than listening to the audio. I couldn't bear to hear his voice. The text read, "Lila, pick up the phone. Are you insane? You are suing your own father? We were going to pay Vance back. It was just a bridge loan until the consulting work took off. We were doing this for the family. After everything we did for you, we raised you. We put clothes on your back. We paid for your college applications. And this is how you repay us? By sending the sheriff to our door? You are an ungrateful, cold-hearted child. He didn't deny the theft. He didn't deny the forgery. He just claimed that raising me gave him a line of credit on my life that never expired. He viewed my autonomy as a debt I had failed to pay. Then came the call from Marjorie. I let it go to voicemail too. Her message was different. She was weeping. The neighbors saw the process server. Lila, Mrs. Higgins was walking her dog. She saw your father being handed legal papers. Do you know how humiliating that is? We can't show our faces at the club. Why do you have to be so dramatic? We could have worked this out. You have so much money. You could have just done the audit for Vance and no one would have known. Why do you have to ruin everything? She wasn't crying because they had committed a crime. She was crying because they had been caught, and because the illusion of their respectability had been punctured in front of Mrs. Higgins. But it was Sienna who delivered the final blow. She didn't call. She sent a voice memo. I played it. Her voice was low, shaking with a rage that sounded almost demonic. You think you are so superior, Sienna hissed. You think because you sit in that tower in Seattle you are better than us. You abandoned this family. Lila, you left us here to rot while you went off and got rich. You owe us. You owe us your name. You owe us every cent you have. We made you. And now you are trying to destroy us because of a few signatures? You are pathetic. You are going to regret this. No one chooses the lonely sister over the family. No one. I sat in the silence that followed. They were doubling down, faced with legal action and irrefutable proof of their crimes. They chose to attack my character rather than admit their guilt. I was about to turn off my phone when a message popped up from a number I didn't have saved. It was Cousin Mark, the one who had asked about the elevator. Hey, Lila. The text read, I know I shouldn't get involved, but this is getting scary. Sienna is saying some crazy stuff in the family group chat that they kicked you out of. I took a screenshot. I think you need to see this. I opened the image. It was a screenshot of a chat thread from 20 minutes ago. Marjorie. She is actually suing us. I can't believe it. Dennis. She is bluffing. She is trying to scare us. Sienna. Exactly. Don't worry. Dad, Lila is soft. I know her buttons. She is terrified of conflict. She hates it more than she hates betrayal. She will fold. She will pay Vance and Henderson just to make the noise stop. She always pays to make the noise stop. We just have to keep the pressure on. She will break before we do. I stared at the words on the screen. She hates conflict more than she hates betrayal. That was their entire strategy. They weren't afraid of my lawyer. They weren't afraid of the police. They were banking on my trauma. They were betting everything on the fact that the little girl who used to hide in her room to avoid arguments was still running the show. They thought I would write a check for $25,000 just to stop the shouting. They thought I was weak. I looked at the screenshot, and then I looked at the reflection of my own eyes in the dark window of my office. They looked tired. Yes, but they didn't look soft. I wasn't the girl who hid in her room anymore. I was the woman who hunted threats for a living. And I had just realized that the biggest threat to my life wasn't a hacker or a corporate spy. It was the people who shared my last name. I picked up the phone and dialed Sarah Jenkins. Sarah, I said, send the police report to Bill Vance, and send a copy to the district attorney. Are you sure? Sarah asked. Once we send that, there is no going back. Your father will likely be charged. I know, I said. They are betting that I will pay to make it go away. I want to show them exactly what happens when I stop paying. Understood, Sarah said. And Sarah? Yes? Add Sienna to the complaint, I said. She admitted to conspiracy in a written communication. I have the receipt. Consider it done. I hung up. The trap had been set, but they had forgotten one crucial detail. When you trap a wild animal, you have to make sure the cage is strong enough to hold it. They had trapped the wrong sister. The first thing I did was kill the digital version of myself. For years, I had curated a professional footprint that was designed to be seen. I had a LinkedIn profile that practically shouted for attention, a bio that listed every accolade, and a digital presence that said, "Look at me. I matter." It was a beacon I had lit, hoping my family would finally see the light, but they had not seen the light. They had only seen the electricity bill, and they decided I should be the one to pay it. So, I went dark. I changed my cell phone number. The new number was given to exactly 4 people: my lawyer, Sarah, the CEO of Kestrel Ridge, my assistant, and my grandmother, Evelyn. I scrubbed my personal email address from every database I could find and set up a new encrypted domain. I locked down my social media. Not that I used it much, but I wanted to make sure that if Sienna tried to tag me in a passive-aggressive post about loyalty, it would hit a digital brick wall. The silence that followed was jarring at first. I was used to the dopamine spikes of anxiety, the constant buzzing of my phone, the low-level hum of dread wondering what they wanted now. When the phone didn't ring for 3 days, I found myself checking it just to make sure the battery wasn't dead. It wasn't dead. It was just peaceful. I realized I couldn't stay in the penthouse anymore, the glass box in the sky that Sienna had coveted, the one with the elevator opening into the living room, felt contaminated. It felt like a stage set I had built to impress an audience that had tried to rob the box office. Every time I looked at the view, I remembered my father calculating the equity. Every time I walked across the marble floors, I heard Sienna's voice saying I was paying for the privilege of being tolerated. I sold it. I bought a house in West Seattle. It was not a penthouse. It was a restored craftsman from the 1920s, tucked away on a street lined with old cedar trees. It had creaky wood floors that smelled of lemon polish and history. It had a garden that was overgrown with ferns and rhododendrons. It had a front porch where you could sit and watch the rain without feeling like you were on display. Nobody knew where it was. That was the most luxurious feature. The address was shielded behind an LLC, to the world, and specifically to the Nelson family. I had simply vanished into the mist of the Pacific Northwest. My life at Kestrel Ridge changed too. I stopped taking the high-profile public speaking gigs. I stopped putting my name on the press releases. I realized I didn't need the applause anymore. I just wanted to do the work. I started mentoring a junior analyst named Chloe. She was 23, brilliant, and terrified. She reminded me of myself at that age, eager to please, apologizing for taking up space, working twice as hard to prove she belonged in the room. One Tuesday, I found her crying in the break room because she had made a minor error in a report. "I am going to get fired," she hiccuped. "I am just not cut out for this." I sat down next to her. "You are not going to get fired. Chloe, you made a mistake. If you weren't making mistakes, I would be worried you weren't actually working. But I need this job," she said, wiping her eyes. "My family, they expect a lot from me." The phrase hit me like a physical blow. My family expects a lot from me. "Chloe," I said gently, "your job is to build a career that fulfills you, not to build a bank account that fulfills them. Do not confuse their expectations with your obligations." She looked at me, her eyes wide. I realized then that this was my new purpose. I wasn't going to be the boss babe icon Sienna wanted to leech off of. I was going to be the woman who quietly handed the ladder down to the next girl so she didn't have to climb it alone. Evelyn started visiting me in February. She would take the train up from Oak Haven, refusing my offer to send a car. She would arrive at my new house with a bag of knitting and a box of tea. She didn't ask for a tour. She didn't ask how much the house cost. She didn't ask if I had met a man. She just sat with me. We would sit on the porch, wrapped in blankets, watching the gray water of the Puget Sound. "It is quiet here," Evelyn said on her second visit. "It suits you." "It feels real," I said. I got tired of the noise. Evelyn nodded, her needles clicking a soft rhythm. "Your father called me yesterday." I stiffened. The old reflex. "You do not have to tense up," Evelyn said without looking up from her wool. "I told him that if he mentioned your name, I would hang up. He tried to start whining about the legal fees from Mr. Vance's lawsuit, I hung up. Is he going to jail? I asked. His lawyer is trying to plead it down, Evelyn said. Bill Vance is furious, but he got his money back. I suspect Dennis will get probation and a heavy fine. But the hardware store is gone. They had to liquidate the inventory to pay the retainer for his defense attorney. I am sorry, I said. Do not dare apologize, Evelyn snapped, pointing a knitting needle at me. He dug that hole with his own shovel. You just refused to jump in with him. She went back to her knitting. You know, she said softly, I never liked that penthouse. It felt cold. This place feels like a home. You did good, Lila. That simple sentence, you did good, meant more to me than the 6-figure bonus I had received the previous year. It was affection without a price tag. It was care that wasn't transactional. I started seeing a therapist named Dr. Eris. I told her everything. I told her about the background noise. I told her about the doing computers comments. I told her about the website and the forgery. You talk about love like it is a limited resource. Doctor, Eris observed during our 4th session, you talk about it like bread in a famine. You think if you don't buy it, you will starve. That is how it felt, I admitted. I thought if I was useful enough, they would finally feed me. Usefulness is not love, Doctor, Eris said. Usefulness is employment. You were their employee, Lila, and you finally quit. It was a slow process. Unlearning the scarcity mindset took time. I had to stop flinching when people were nice to me, expecting the invoice to follow. I had to learn that I could exist without performing. By March, I felt steady. The police investigation into my father was proceeding without my direct involvement. Sarah Jenkins, my lawyer, was handling the fallout from the fake consulting firm. The website was down. The threats had stopped. I was beginning to breathe. Then came the envelope. It was delivered to my office at Kestrel Ridge, marked personal and confidential. It wasn't from a family member. It was from a law firm in the state capital. I opened it with a letter opener, feeling a prick of annoyance but no real fear. Probably a final notice about some lingering account my father had put in my name that we had missed. I pulled out the document. Superior Court of the State. Plaintiff. The Nelson Family Trust. Dennis Nelson, Marjorie Nelson, Sienna Nelson. Defendant. Lila Nelson. Complaint for breach of contract and promissory estoppel. I read the cover letter. The world seemed to slow down. The lawsuit claimed that over the course of the last 10 years, I had entered into a binding verbal and implied contract to support the family financially in exchange for their support of my education and early career. It claimed that my recent withdrawal of funding was a breach of this agreement, causing them undue hardship and emotional distress, but it was paragraph 4 that made my blood turn to ice. The plaintiff asserts that the defendant, Lila Nelson, explicitly promised to fund the Nelson family investment strategy during a meeting on December 24th. The defendant's verbal commitment was witnessed by all 3 plaintiffs. Furthermore, the plaintiffs relied on this promise to make business decisions, resulting in significant financial damages when the defendant reneged on her obligation. They were suing me. They weren't apologizing. They weren't begging. They were weaponizing the legal system to force me to pay them the money they felt they were owed. They were claiming that my promise at Christmas, which never happened, was a legal contract, and they were using the fact that I had given them money in the past as proof of a pattern. They were twisting my generosity into an obligation. She paid us before. Therefore, she admitted she owes us. I sat there, staring at the document. It was absurd. It would likely get thrown out of court. But the audacity of it was breathtaking. They were willing to drag this into a public forum. They were willing to stand before a judge and lie under oath, claiming I had promised to be their bank. I called Evelyn. They sued me, I said. I know, Evelyn said. Her voice was grim. Sienna posted about it on her private story. She called it, "Taking Back What Is Ours." They are claiming I promised to fund them, I said, my voice shaking with a mixture of rage and disbelief. They are claiming a verbal contract. Lila, Evelyn said, listen to me. Do you remember when I told you I had been keeping receipts? I remember, I said. I didn't just mean mental notes, Evelyn said. I meant actual receipts. When your father started talking about this strategy months ago, I started saving things. I have emails he sent me bragging about how he was going to guilt trip you. I have the group chat logs that Sienna thinks she deleted. I have a voicemail from Marjorie from 2 years ago where she explicitly laughs about how you don't owe them anything but they make you feel like you do. I gripped the phone. You have evidence? I have a box full of evidence, Evelyn said. I have kept a diary of every conversation I have had with them about you for 5 years. I wrote down dates. I wrote down times. I wrote down exact quotes. I knew this day would come. I knew they would try to rewrite history. Why did you do that? I asked, tears pricking my eyes. Because I knew they would try to gaslight you, Evelyn said fiercely. And I wanted to make sure that when the time came, you had the ammunition to blow their lies out of the water. They want to go to court, I said, looking at the summons. They want a deposition. They don't want a deposition, Evelyn corrected me. They want a settlement. They think you will be too embarrassed to have your name dragged through the mud. They think you will write them a check for $50,000 just to keep this out of the public record. They are banking on your shame. I looked at the document again. Plaintiff. The Nelson Family Trust. They were right about one thing. The old Lila would have settled. The old Lila would have been mortified. The old Lila would have paid any price to keep the family drama behind closed doors. But I wasn't the old Lila. I was the woman who had burned the website down. I was the woman who lived in a house with creaky floors and a garden. I was the woman who had Evelyn in her corner. They want a public fight? I said, feeling a cold, hard smile form on my face. Okay, let's give them one. That is my girl, Evelyn said. I hung up the phone and looked at the lawsuit. This wasn't just a legal dispute. It was an extortion attempt wrapped in legal letterhead. They were trying to use the law to enforce a toxic relationship. They were trying to mandate love via a court order. I called Sarah Jenkins. Sarah, I said, I just got served. I have it too, Sarah said. It is frivolous. Lila, we can file a motion to dismiss. No, I said. No? Sarah asked, surprised. If we dismiss it, they will just try something else, I said. They will keep coming back. They will keep telling their version of the story. I want to end this. I want it on the record. You want to go to discovery? Sarah asked. Lila, that means opening up everything. It means they will depose you. It will be ugly. I don't care, I said. Evelyn has evidence. She has diaries, emails, voicemails. She has proof of premeditated manipulation. I want to countersue for abuse of process and malicious prosecution. And I want to subpoena their financial records. I want to show the court exactly where every dime I gave them went. You want to go to war, Sarah said. No, I said, looking out at the gray sky. I want to go to a funeral. I want to bury the lie that I owe them anything, and I want to do it in front of a judge, with a court reporter taking down every single word. Okay, Sarah said. I could hear the smile in her voice. I will draft the response. We are not settling. We are not settling, I repeated. We are finishing it. I put the paperwork down. My hands were steady. The fear was gone. In its place was something stronger, something like steel. They had tried to break me by making me feel invisible. Then they had tried to break me by making me feel responsible. Now, they were trying to break me by making me feel ashamed. They were about to learn that shame dies when you drag it into the light. And I was about to turn on every floodlight I owned. The conference room was airless and smelled of lemon polish and aggressive cologne. It was a neutral site, a mediation center in the state capitol, chosen because it was halfway between Oak Haven and Seattle. The table was a long slab of mahogany that looked like a runway, and we were parked at opposite ends. On one side sat the Nelson family. My mother, Marjorie, was wearing a cardigan I had seen her wear to funerals. She was clutching a tissue, dabbing at dry eyes, performing the role of the heartbreak-stricken matriarch to perfection. My father, Dennis, wore a suit that was slightly too tight across the shoulders, his face set in a mask of righteous indignation, and Sienna sat between them, dressed in a soft pink blouse, looking small, fragile, and utterly innocent. She was playing the victim. On the other side sat me, my lawyer Sarah Jenkins, and Evelyn. I wore a charcoal blazer and the kind of silence that usually costs $400 an hour. I didn't look at them. I looked at the mediator, a retired judge named Mr. Sterling, who looked like he had seen every variety of human greed and was bored by all of it. We are here to discuss the complaint filed by the Nelson Family Trust, Mr. Sterling said, opening a file folder. The plaintiffs allege a breach of verbal contract and are seeking damages in the amount of $250,000 for financial hardship and reliance on promised funds. $250,000. They had put a price tag on their love, and it was $250,000. Their lawyer, a man named Mr. Blanton, who had a comb-over and a loud tie, stood up. He started his opening statement with a flourish. Your Honor, Blanton began, addressing the mediator out of habit, this is a simple case of a family betrayed. Lila Nelson, a woman of significant means, made a clear verbal commitment to her aging parents and her struggling sister. She stood in their living room on Christmas Eve and promised to fund a family investment strategy. Based on that promise, my clients made financial decisions. They leveraged their assets, and when Ms. Nelson capriciously withdrew her support, she left them in ruin. It was cruel, it was calculated, and it was a breach of contract. Marjorie let out a soft, strangled sob. Sienna patted her hand, looking at me with wide, wounded eyes. It was good theater. If I didn't know the script, I might have believed it. Sarah Jenkins didn't stand up. She didn't need to perform. She simply slid a piece of paper across the table. Mr. Sterling, Sarah said, her voice cool and crisp. The plaintiffs claim that this verbal contract was established on December 24th, during a heart-to-heart conversation in the living room. Is that correct? It is, Dennis said, leaning forward. She looked me in the eye and said she said she wanted to be the head of the family. And what time did this conversation take place? Sarah asked. It was after dinner, Dennis said quickly. Around 9 o'clock. We were having brandy. Sarah tapped the paper. This is a GPS log from Miss Nelson's rental car company. It shows that her vehicle left the Nelson residence at 8:15 in the evening. She was back at her hotel by 8:45. She wasn't in your living room at 9 o'clock. She was ordering room service. The silence in the room was sudden and sharp. Dennis blinked. He looked at Mr. Blanton. Well, Dennis stammered, maybe it was earlier. The exact time doesn't matter. The promise matters. The details matter when you are accusing someone of fraud, Sarah said. She slid another document across the table. You also claim that my client has a history of supporting the family business, implying a partnership. Here are the bank records for every transfer Lila Nelson has made to you in the last 5 years. None of them are marked as investments. They are marked as gift, rent help, medical bill, and groceries. You don't sue a donor because they stop donating. Mr. Nelson. She led us on, Marjorie cried out, dropping the tissue. She acted like she wanted to help. She played the good daughter. She acted like a daughter, I said. It was the first time I had spoken. My voice was steady. You acted like banks. Let's talk about the consulting firm, Sarah interrupted, before they could launch another emotional appeal. The Nelson Consulting Group, Sienna stiffened. I saw her hand tighten around her water glass. That is irrelevant. Mr. Blanton said quickly, that was a failed startup. It has nothing to do with this case. It has everything to do with this case, Sarah said, because your clients used Lila Nelson's name, image, and professional credentials to solicit deposits from local investors without her consent. They claimed she was an executive partner. If she had promised to fund them, why did they need to steal her identity to get money? We didn't steal anything, Sienna snapped, her facade cracking. We were just using resources. Lila wasn't using the name locally. We were building the brand for her. Sarah looked at Sienna. She pulled a single sheet of paper from her folder. It was a screenshot. This is a text message chain between you and your father, dated January 10th. Sarah said, Sienna, you wrote, if we put Lila's face on the homepage, we can charge double. She won't notice. She is too busy looking down on us to check the local web. And Dennis, you replied, good idea. Just make sure the signature looks real enough to pass a glance. Sienna's face drained of color. She looked like a ghost. Dennis slumped in his chair. The indignation was gone, replaced by the terrified realization that they had been stripped naked in a room full of strangers. This isn't a breach of contract, Sarah said to the mediator. This is an attempted extortion following a failed identity theft scheme. My client owes them nothing. In fact, if we proceed to trial, we will be filing criminal charges for the forgery regarding the Vance contract. Mr. Sterling looked at the Nelsons. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. Mr. Blanton, the mediator said, his voice flat, I suggest you advise your clients to withdraw this complaint immediately. If this goes to court, I suspect the outcome will be significantly worse than just losing a lawsuit. The room was silent. The air conditioner hummed. I looked at my family. The masks were gone. There was no heartbreak, no righteous anger, no innocence. There was just greed, panic, and a deep, festering resentment. Then, Evelyn stood up. She had been sitting quietly in the corner. A small figure in a gray wool suit. She walked to the edge of the table. She didn't look at me. She looked at her son. I have been keeping a diary for 5 years, Evelyn said. Her voice was not loud, but it carried the weight of a gavel. I wrote down every time you asked Lila for money. I wrote down every time you mocked her after she left the room. I wrote down the date you decided that her love was a weakness you could exploit. She placed a thick, leather-bound notebook on the table. It landed with a heavy thud. You didn't want a daughter, Evelyn said to Dennis and Marjorie. You wanted a pension plan, and you... She turned to Sienna. You didn't want a sister. You wanted a sponsor. You broke her heart because you thought it would make her wallet open faster. That is not family. That is predation. Dennis couldn't look at her. Marjorie was weeping again, but this time, the tears were real. They were the tears of someone who realizes they have played their final card and lost. We are done here, I said. I stood up. I didn't wait for them to respond. I walked out of the conference room. I walked down the hallway, past the reception desk, and out into the cool, gray afternoon. The lawsuit was dropped the next morning. Sarah called me to tell me the news. They withdrew with prejudice, she said, meaning they can never sue you for this again. It is over, Lila. Thank you, Sarah, I said. 2 weeks later, Evelyn came to my house in West Seattle. She brought a document with her. It was her updated estate plan. I made some changes, she said, sitting at my kitchen table. I wanted you to see them so you are not surprised later. I poured her tea. Grandma, you don't have to leave me anything. I have enough. I know you do, she said. That is why I am not leaving you any money. If I left you money, they would never stop hunting you. They would guilt you, beg you, and harass you until you gave it to them. She opened the folder. I am leaving the bulk of my estate to a charitable trust for literacy, she said. Dennis and Marjorie will receive the house in Oakhaven, but with a stipulation, they cannot mortgage it, and they cannot sell it. It is a place to live, not an asset to liquidate. They will have a roof over their heads, which is more than they deserve, but I am not cruel. And Sienna? I asked. Sienna gets nothing, Evelyn said. She is young. She can work. Maybe without the safety net of potential inheritance, she will finally learn to stand on her own 2 feet. She pushed the paper toward me. But I am leaving you something, she said. I am leaving you my journals. All of them. 50 years of my life. The truth of this family. I want you to have the record, so you never, ever doubt your own memory again. I touched the paper. It was the ultimate protection. She wasn't giving me wealth. She was giving me the truth. She was ensuring that I would never be gaslit again. "Thank you," I whispered. Evelyn reached out and covered my hand with hers. Her skin was paper thin, but her grip was strong. "You won, Lila, not because you fought them, but because you stopped playing." That evening, after Evelyn left, I sat on my back porch. The rain had stopped, and the clouds were breaking apart to reveal a sliver of moon. The air smelled of wet cedar and salt. I thought about the silence. For 30 years, silence had been my enemy. It had been the sound of being ignored, of being passed over, of being background noise. I had filled it with work, with achievements, with money, trying to make enough noise to be heard. But tonight, the silence was different. It wasn't empty. It was full. It was full of safety. It was full of the knowledge that no one was plotting against me. No one was counting my money. No one was waiting for me to fail. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the cool air. I didn't need to be the lead vocalist anymore. I didn't need to be on the soundtrack at all. I was the composer of my own life now, and for the first time, I liked the music. The background noise was gone. All that was left was peace. Thank you so much for listening to Lila's story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. Please drop your country or city in the comments below so we can see how far this story has traveled. If you enjoyed this journey of justice and self-worth, please subscribe to the channel Monica Revenge Stories. Hit that like button and give the video a hype to help this story reach even more people who might need to hear it. Stay strong and see you in the next story.